The boarding pass in her hand said Seat 2A, a golden ticket to a life Marissa had only ever seen in movies. But as she buckled her seatbelt, she didn't see luxury. She saw the sneer of a woman in diamonds standing over her, demanding she return to where she belonged. What the woman and her arrogant husband didn't know was that the quiet man reading a newspaper 3 rows back wasn't just another passenger. He was the man who owned the plane. And he had been waiting a very long time to see exactly how his staff and his high-paying customers treated the people they thought were invisible. Marissa adjusted the collar of her thrifted blazer, her fingers brushing against the fabric to self-soothe. It was a nervous habit she had developed during the final rounds of the Future Innovators Scholarship interviews, and it had followed her all the way to JFK International Airport. Today, however, the anxiety was mixed with a surreal sense of wonder. She looked down at the ticket in her hand. First class, Flight 882 to Geneva. It wasn't a mistake, though she had checked the airline app 5 times since arriving at the terminal. The scholarship from the Bennett Foundation didn't just cover her tuition for the summer engineering program in Switzerland. It covered everything: travel, accommodation, and apparently a level of comfort Marissa, a 17-year-old girl from a cramped apartment in Detroit, could scarcely comprehend. The flight attendant, a young woman with a tight bun and a name tag reading Chloe, smiled warmly as Marissa stepped onto the plane. "Welcome aboard, Miss Jackson," Chloe said, glancing at the digital manifest. "Let me show you to your seat. 2A. It's a window seat on the left." Marissa followed her, dragging her carry-on bag. The air inside the cabin smelled different than the rest of the airport. Cleaner, faintly scented with lavender and expensive leather. When she reached 2A, she hesitated. The seat looked more like a throne. It was wide, upholstered in cream-colored leather, with a personal screen larger than the TV in her living room. "Is this really mine?" Marissa whispered. Chloe chuckled softly. "All yours. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage? Sparkling water, orange juice?" "Just water, please," Marissa said, stowing her bag in the overhead bin. She sat down, feeling the plush cushion sink beneath her. For a moment, she allowed herself to close her eyes. She had worked so hard for this. The late nights studying while her mum worked double shifts, the extra tutoring sessions, the hunger she tried to ignore during school hours so she could save lunch money for textbooks. This seat felt like the first tangible reward for all of it. But the peace was fragile. A commotion at the front of the cabin made her eyes snap open. "I don't care what the computer says. I specifically requested 2A and 2B for privacy." A shrill voice pierced the calm atmosphere. Marissa turned her head. Standing at the entrance of the first-class cabin was a couple that looked like they had stepped out of a catalogue for people who owned yachts. The woman, draped in a cashmere shawl that probably cost more than Marissa's entire wardrobe, was pointing a manicured finger at the lead flight attendant. Beside her stood a man in a sharp navy suit, checking his heavy gold watch with an air of immense boredom. These were Grant and Beatrice Harrington. Marissa didn't know their names yet, but she recognized the type. They were the kind of people who moved through the world assuming the air itself should part for them. "Mrs. Harrington, I understand," the purser, a man named David, said calmly. "But the seat map was finalized this morning. You are in 3A and 3B. They are excellent seats, identical to—" "I don't want 3A and 3B, Beatrice snapped, her eyes scanning the cabin. "I want the bulkhead row. I need the extra legroom for my bag, and I don't want to be staring at a wall." Her gaze swept across the front row. Seat 1A was occupied by an elderly man who was already asleep. Seat 1B was empty. Then her eyes landed on 2A. Marissa froze. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. She leaned in toward her husband, Grant, and whispered something. Grant looked up, his eyes locking onto Marissa. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He walked past the purser, ignoring David's protests, and marched straight up to Marissa's row. "Excuse me," Grant said. He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a command. Marissa swallowed hard. "Yes? You're in the wrong seat," Grant stated flatly. He gestured vaguely toward the back of the plane. "Economy boarding is through the next galley. You must have gotten confused." Marissa sat up straighter, clutching the armrests. "No, I'm not confused. This is my seat. 2A. Beatrice arrived at her husband's side, letting out a short, incredulous laugh. "Grant, don't be ridiculous. Look at her." She didn't lower her voice. She's obviously a stowaway, or she sneaked in while the attendant wasn't looking. "Sweetie," she addressed Marissa with a tone dripping with condescension. "This happens sometimes. You see an open seat and think, why not? But these seats cost $10,000. You need to go back to your assigned seat before we call security." "I have a ticket," Marissa said, her voice shaking slightly but holding firm. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the boarding pass, holding it up. "Marissa Jackson, seat 2A. Grant didn't even look at the paper. He looked at David, the purser, who had rushed over. "Get this sorted," Grant barked. "I am a Platinum Infinite member with this airline. My company, Harrington Logistics, spends $500,000 a year on corporate travel. I booked this flight expecting comfort, not to be argued with by a child who is clearly playing games." David looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Marissa's ticket, then at his manifest. "Mr. Harrington, Ms. Jackson is in her correct seat. Her ticket is valid." "Valid?" Beatrice scoffed. "Paid for by whom? Did she win a raffle? Is this some charity case?" She looked at Marissa with pure disgust. "I don't care if it's valid. It's unacceptable. We are paying customers. Full fare. We want 2A and 2B so we can be together near the front. Move her." "I can't just move a passenger, ma'am," David said, his professional mask slipping just a fraction. "The flight is fully booked." "Then downgrade her," Grant said, as if the solution was obvious. "Put her in economy. Give her a voucher for a meal or whatever it takes to shut her up. I'm not sitting behind a teenager for 8 hours. And certainly not—" He trailed off, his eyes flicking over Marissa's braided hair and worn sneakers, leaving the racist implication hanging heavily in the silence. Marissa felt hot tears pricking her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She remembered what her mother had told her. In rooms where they don't want you, you have to stand twice as tall. "I'm not moving," Marissa said clearly. The cabin went silent. The rustling of newspapers stopped. Beatrice's jaw dropped. "Excuse me." "I said, I'm not moving," Marissa repeated, looking Beatrice in the eye. "I earned this seat. It was part of a scholarship I worked for. I have every right to be here. Same as you." Grant's face turned a shade of red that clashed with his tie. He leaned down, placing a hand on the back of Marissa's seat, invading her personal space. "Listen to me," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't care about your little scholarship. In the real world, money talks, and you don't have any. Now you can walk back to row 45 comfortably, or I can make sure you never fly on this airline, or any airline, again. Do you have any idea who I am?" "I don't care who you are," Marissa said, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "David!" Grant shouted, standing up and turning to the purser. "This is harassment. She is being aggressive. I feel threatened. Remove her immediately." "Sir, she hasn't done anything," David tried to interject. "She is refusing to accommodate a platinum member," Beatrice shrieked, causing several passengers to turn around. "She is stealing our comfort. This is unbelievable. I am going to tweet about this. I am going to live stream this right now." She fumbled for her phone. Chloe, the flight attendant who had seated Marissa, stepped forward, looking terrified, but determined. "Mr. Harrington, please lower your voice. You are disturbing the other passengers." "I'll disturb whoever I want until this mistake is rectified," Grant bellowed. He pointed a finger at Marissa. "Get out!" Marissa shrank back into the leather. She felt small. The luxury of the seat suddenly felt like a trap. Maybe she should just move. Maybe it wasn't worth the humiliation. She started to reach for her seatbelt buckle. "Don't you dare unbuckle that seatbelt, young lady." The voice was calm, deep, and authoritative. It didn't come from the crew. It came from the back of the first-class cabin. Grant and Beatrice spun around. A man in seat 4D folded his newspaper, the Financial Times, and placed it on his tray table. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and thick-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple grey sweater over a button-down shirt. He didn't look like he owned a yacht. He looked like a grandfather who enjoyed chess. "Excuse me," Grant snapped. "Mind your own business, old man. This is a private dispute." "It became public when you started shouting at a minor," the man said, standing up. He wasn't particularly tall, but he held himself with a gravity that made him seem immense. He walked down the aisle slowly, his eyes fixed on Grant. "And who are you?" Beatrice sneered, looking him up and down. "Another charity case?" The man ignored her. He stopped at row 2 and looked at Marissa. His expression softened instantly. "You're Marissa Jackson, aren't you?" Marissa blinked, stunned. "Yes." "How did you know?" "I recognized the logo on your folder." He nodded toward the bag she had stowed. "The Bennett Future Innovators Program. Excellent work on that application essay regarding sustainable avionics, by the way. Biomimicry in wing design. Fascinating stuff." Grant laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Oh, great. A fan club. Look, buddy, take your engineering talk back to row 4. We are dealing with a situation here." The man turned to Grant. The softness was gone from his eyes, replaced by something cold and hard as steel. "You are certainly creating a situation, Mr. Harrington. I believe I heard you mention your company, Harrington Logistics." "That's right," Grant puffed out his chest. "We move major freight across the Atlantic. We are vital partners to this airline." "Vital," the man repeated, testing the word. Interesting choice of vocabulary. "Sir," David the purser stepped in, looking anxious. "Please return to your seat. We are trying to de-escalate." "I am de-escalating, David," the man said, without looking away from Grant. "By clarifying the hierarchy here." "Hierarchy?" Beatrice laughed. "Honey, look at your shoes. They're Aldo, maybe Clark's. You don't know the first thing about hierarchy. We are Platinum Infinite." "Platinum Infinite," the man nodded. "A loyalty tier created in 2018 to reward high-volume corporate accounts. It comes with priority boarding, lounge access, and 3 complimentary upgrades per year. It does not," his voice dropped an octave, "come with the right to evict a teenage girl from a seat she has rightfully earned." Grant stepped closer to the man, towering over him. "You think you can lecture me? I can buy and sell you 10 times over. Now get out of my face before I have you removed along with the girl." The man smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You want to remove me? Go ahead. Ask the pilot." "I will!" Grant shouted. "Pilot! Captain! Mr. Harrington, stop!" Chloe pleaded. "Let him," the man said softly. "Let him call the captain." Just then the cockpit door opened. The captain, a stern-faced man with 4 stripes on his shoulder, stepped out. He looked at the commotion, his eyes scanning the group. Beatrice with her phone out, Grant red-faced and shouting, Marissa trembling in her seat, and the grey-haired man standing calmly in the aisle. Grant smirked. Finally. "Captain, these 2 passengers are disrupting the flight. This man is threatening me, and that girl is in my seat. I want them off." The captain looked at Grant, then he looked at the grey-haired man. The captain's face went pale. He immediately straightened his posture, snapping his heels together. "Mr. Bennett," the captain said, his voice respectful and surprised. I didn't see your name on the manifest." Grant froze. "Mr. who?" The grey-haired man, Arthur Bennett, looked at the captain. "I booked under a pseudonym, Captain Miller. I wanted to see how my airline was operating when management wasn't watching. And I must say," he turned his gaze back to Grant and Beatrice, who were now looking very confused, "I am learning a great deal." The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that usually precedes a thunderclap. Even the air-conditioning vents seemed to pause their gentle hum. Grant Harrington blinked, his brain struggling to process the information. He looked at the man in the grey sweater, Arthur Bennett. The name was legendary in the aviation industry, but the face was rarely seen. Bennett was a recluse billionaire, an engineer by trade who had built Regal Atlantic Airlines from a single cargo plane into a global empire. He was known for his ruthlessness in business, but his invisibility in the press. "Bennett?" Grant repeated, his voice losing its booming quality, replaced by a confused stammer. "Arthur Bennett? No, that's impossible. Your flying commercial, in row 4. "I own the plane, Mr. Harrington," Arthur said, his voice level but cutting. "I can sit wherever I damn well please, and today I chose seat 4D because it has a slightly better view of the engine cowling, which I helped design." Beatrice, whose phone was still raised, recording the scene for her 3,000 followers, lowered her arm slowly. Her face, previously flushed with indignation, drained of color. The comments on her live stream were likely shifting from, "You go, girl," to, "Wait, is that the CEO?" "Captain Miller," Arthur said, turning his attention back to the pilot. "What is the protocol for passengers who verbally abuse minors, threaten crew members, and attempt to commandeer seating arrangements that do not belong to them?" Captain Miller didn't hesitate. "That is classified as Level 1 interference with flight crew duties, sir. It's grounds for immediate removal from the aircraft." "Removal?" Grant found his voice again, the arrogance surging back like a reflex. He stepped forward, trying to use his physical size to intimidate, forgetting he was trying to intimidate a man who owned entire islands. "Now hold on a minute. Let's not be hasty. Do you know how much business Harrington Logistics brings to this airline? We are talking millions. You kick me off, and I pull the contract. I'll go to Delta. I'll go to United. I will bankrupt your cargo division." Arthur Bennett laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of spectacles, putting them on slowly. "Mr. Harrington, let me educate you on the economics of my company," Arthur said, stepping closer to Grant until they were nose to nose. "Harrington Logistics accounts for exactly 0.04% of our annual cargo revenue. You ship mid-grade auto parts and discounted textiles. You are not a partner. You are a customer. And based on your behavior today, you are a liability." Arthur turned to Marissa, who was still pressed into her seat, her eyes wide. He offered her a gentle smile, a stark contrast to the glare he had given Grant. "Ms. Jackson here, on the other hand," Arthur gestured to the teenager, "is the future. The scholarship she won? I funded it personally. I read every application. Her proposal for noise reduction chevrons on turbine blades is more valuable to this industry than your entire logistics company will ever be. She isn't just a passenger. She is an invited guest of the airline. And you—" Arthur's eyes snapped back to Grant and Beatrice. "You are trespassing." "This is ridiculous," Beatrice shrieked, panic setting in. "We have rights. We paid full fare. You can't just kick us off because you're on a power trip." "I'm not kicking you off because of power, Mrs. Harrington," Arthur said coolly. "I'm kicking you off because you bullied a child. You saw a young black girl in a nice seat and decided that the laws of physics and commerce must have broken down. You couldn't conceive of a world where she belonged there, and you didn't. That is a rot in your character, and I won't have it on my plane." "I am not a racist," Beatrice yelled, looking around the cabin for support. The other passengers, however, were not sympathetic. A woman in 3D was openly filming them now. A businessman in 1A shook his head in disgust. "I didn't call you a racist, Beatrice," Arthur said softly. "I said you have a rot in your character. But if the shoe fits, by all means, lace it up." Grant grabbed the purser, David by the arm. "David, listen to me. This is insane. You know me. I fly this route once a month. Talk some sense into him." David pulled his arm away sharply. "Don't touch me, sir." "That's assault," Arthur noted calmly. "Captain Miller, call the Port Authority. I want them waiting at the jet bridge." "You can't be serious," Grant hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. "You're going to arrest me. For what? Wanting a better seat?" "For interfering with a flight crew. For assault. And for delaying my flight." Arthur checked his watch. "We are now 6 minutes behind schedule. Fuel is burning. My pilots are on the clock. You are costing me money, Grant, and I really hate losing money." "I'll sue!" Grant roared, his composure shattering completely. "I will sue you for every penny you have. I'll sue the airline. I'll sue this little girl for emotional distress." Marissa flinched at the mention of being sued. She looked at Arthur, terror in her eyes. "Mr. Bennett, maybe I should just move. I don't want any trouble. I can sit in the back. Really, it's fine." Arthur looked at her, and his heart broke a little. He saw the conditioning in her, the instinct to shrink, to accommodate, to make herself smaller so the angry, powerful people would calm down. "Marissa," Arthur said firmly, "look at me." She looked up. "You never move," he said. "Not for people like this. If you move now, they win. They learn that they can scream and threaten and get what they want. You stay right there. This is your seat. You earned it, do you understand?" Marissa nodded slowly, a tear finally escaping and tracking down her cheek. "Yes, sir." "Good." Arthur turned to the captain. "Make the call, Captain. Get them off my plane." Beatrice gasped. "Grant, do something. They're humiliating us." Grant pulled out his phone, his hands shaking. "I'm calling Senator Higgins. He's a personal friend. He'll have your license revoked, Bennett. He'll ground this whole fleet." "Senator Higgins?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Bob Higgins? The one who uses my private jet for his campaign tours? Go ahead, Grant. Call him. Put him on speaker. I'd love to tell Bob why his friend is harassing a scholarship student." Grant froze. His thumb hovered over the screen. He knew, with a sinking dread, that he had no cards left to play. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from tense to chaotic as the distinct sound of heavy boots echoed from the jet bridge. 2 officers from the Port Authority Police Department boarded the aircraft. They were large men, their expressions unamused. Behind them was a sergeant, a woman named Davis, who looked like she had dealt with 5 entitlement crises before breakfast. "Who's the problem?" Sergeant Davis asked, her voice cutting through the murmurs. David, the purser, pointed immediately to Grant and Beatrice. "These 2, Sergeant. Refusing crew instructions, aggressive behavior, unwanted physical contact with a crew member." "And he threatened the owner," Captain Miller added, standing by the cockpit door. Sergeant Davis looked at Arthur Bennett. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. Everyone at the airport knew the big boss, but she kept it professional. "Mr. Bennett, are you pressing charges?" "I am," Arthur said, "for the assault on my purser, and I want them trespassed from the airline's property." "All right." Sergeant Davis turned to the Harringtons. "Folks, grab your bags. You're leaving, now." "This is a mistake," Beatrice cried, clinging to the overhead bin as if it were a life raft. "We are Platinum members. You can't treat us like criminals." "Mum, once the captain wants you off, you're trespassing," Davis said, her hand resting near her belt. "We can do this the easy way, where you walk off, or the hard way, where you leave in cuffs and we drag your luggage out after you. Your choice." Grant stared at the officers. He looked at the passengers watching him. He looked at Marissa, sitting quietly in seat 2A. The reality of the situation finally pierced his bubble of delusion. He wasn't winning. He wasn't going to get the seat. "Fine," Grant spat. "We're leaving. I don't want to be on this garbage airline anyway." He grabbed his briefcase, aggressively yanking it from under the seat. He turned to Beatrice. "Get your bag, Bea." "But my shawl," Beatrice wailed. "It's under the seat." "Leave it," Grant barked. They shuffled into the aisle. But the humiliation wasn't over. Because they had blocked the aisle for so long, the boarding process had been paused. Now that they were moving against the flow of traffic, they had to squeeze past the economy passengers who were waiting in the jet bridge tunnel. As Grant and Beatrice stepped off the plane, Grant turned back one last time to look at Marissa. "You think you won," he sneered, his face ugly with malice. "But you're still nobody. You'll be back in the gutter tomorrow, and I'll still be rich." "That's enough." Officer O'Malley, one of the patrolmen, grabbed Grant's arm and spun him around. "Keep walking." As they were escorted up the jet bridge, the sound of slow clapping began. It started from seat 4A, the businessman, and spread. Soon the entire first-class cabin was applauding. Even the economy passengers in the tunnel, who had heard rumors of what was happening, joined in as the furious couple was marched past them. Back inside the cabin, the tension evaporated, replaced by a buzzing energy. Arthur stood in the aisle, straightening his sweater. He looked at David. "David, I apologize for what you had to endure. Take a moment if you need it." "I'm fine, sir," David said, straightening his tie, though his hands were trembling slightly. "Just doing my job." "You did it well," Arthur said. Then he turned to Marissa. She was staring out the window, wiping her face with the sleeve of her blazer. Arthur sat down on the ottoman of her seat. Seat 2A. "Marissa?" She turned to him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I caused all this trouble." "No," Arthur said firmly. "You didn't cause anything. You existed, and for some people, that's provocation enough. But I want you to listen to me very carefully. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It wasn't the standard, glossy cardboard. It was heavy, metal, etched with gold lettering. "This is my direct line," Arthur said, placing it in her hand. "Not my secretary. Not my office. Me. When you get to Geneva, you're going to focus on your studies. You're going to build those wings you wrote about. But if anyone tries to make you feel like you don't belong in the room or the seat or the laboratory, you call me." Marissa looked at the card. Arthur J. Bennett, CEO. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Mr. Harrington, he said he would ruin me. That he'd sue." Arthur's eyes darkened. "Grant Harrington is about to find out that the world is much smaller than he thinks. He declared war on the wrong people today. Don't you worry about him. By the time you land in Geneva, Grant will have much bigger problems than a lawsuit." Arthur stood up and patted her shoulder. "Now enjoy the flight. The caviar is excellent, but I highly recommend the short rib." He walked back to row 4 and sat down, picking up his newspaper as if nothing had happened. But on the jet bridge, the nightmare for the Harringtons was just beginning. Grant and Beatrice were dumped back into the terminal, the heavy security door slamming shut behind them. Passers-by stared. Beatrice was sobbing, her mascara running down her face. Grant was pacing, frantically dialing his phone. Pick up, damn it!" Grant screamed into his mobile. He was trying to call his lawyer, a man named Sterling Vance. No, wait, he couldn't use those names. A man named Robert Thorne. No, not Thorne either. He needed his fixer, Charles. "Charles!" Grant yelled when the line connected. "I need you to fix this. Regal Atlantic just kicked me off a flight. Me! I want to sue them for breach of contract. I want to sue for defamation. Get the PR team ready to spin this." "Grant?" Charles's voice sounded tinny and strange. "Where are you?" "I'm at JFK, Terminal 4. "Grant, you need to check your email," Charles said. His voice was grim. "I don't have time for email. Just draft the lawsuit." "Grant, shut up and listen," Charles snapped. "The video is already online." Grant stopped pacing. "What video?" Someone on the plane was live streaming. A woman named Beatrice Harrington. "Your wife?" Grant whipped his head around to look at Beatrice, who was clutching her phone, her face pale. She was recording the girl," Grant stammered. "Yeah, well, she recorded you threatening Arthur Bennett," Charles said. "It's been viewed 2 million times in the last 20 minutes. It's trending on X. It's on the front page of Reddit. First class racist is the #1 hashtag in the country right now." Grant felt the blood drain from his legs. "So? It's just internet noise. It'll blow over." "No, Grant, it won't," Charles said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The board just called an emergency meeting. They saw the video. They saw you threaten to pull the contract with Regal Atlantic. They saw you assault a flight attendant." "I didn't assault him. I touched his arm." "It doesn't matter," Charles shouted. "The stock dropped 4% in the last 10 minutes. Our major investors are calling. They're saying you're toxic. They're talking about a vote of no confidence, Grant. They want you out." Grant dropped the phone. It clattered onto the polished terrazzo floor of the terminal. "Grant?" Beatrice asked, her voice trembling. "What is it?" Grant looked at her, his eyes hollow. "We didn't just lose the seats, B. I think I just lost the company." Back on Flight 882, the engines roared to life. Marissa watched the ground fall away as the plane lifted into the sky. She reclined her seat, the leather soft and cool against her skin. She took a sip of the sparkling water Chloe had brought her in a crystal glass. She looked at the metal card in her hand. Arthur J. Bennett. She wasn't just a girl from Detroit anymore. She was a girl with an ally. And as the plane pierced through the clouds into the brilliant sunlight above, Marissa realized that for the first time in her life, the turbulence was behind her. Or so she thought. Because while the Harringtons were destroyed, karma has a way of being thorough. And Arthur Bennett wasn't done yet. He had made a call from the taxiway, a call to a friend at the IRS. If Grant Harrington liked auditing people's worth, it was only fair someone audited his. The glass doors of the JFK terminal felt less like an exit and more like the walls of a fishbowl. Grant and Beatrice Harrington stood near the baggage claim carousel, an island of expensive luggage and misery amidst a sea of travelers who were beginning to recognize them. It started with whispers. A group of college students standing near the exit pointed phones in their direction. "That's them," a girl in a hoodie whispered loud enough to carry. "The first-class racists." "Hey, Mr. Harrington," a boy shouted, holding his phone up like a weapon. "How's the view from the terminal? Not much legroom down here, huh?" Grant clenched his jaw, his face a mask of purple rage. "Ignore them, Beatrice. Just call the car service. Get the black Escalade. We're going to the St. Regis. I need a drink and a secure line." Beatrice was frantically tapping on her phone, her acrylic nails clicking against the screen like hail on a tin roof. "I can't, Grant." "What do you mean you can't? The app is right there." The account, Beatrice looked up, her eyes wide with a new kind of terror. It says account suspended. It says to contact the bank. "Give me that." Grant snatched the phone. He opened his Uber Black account. Suspended. He tried his Lyft account. Review pending. "It's the algorithm," Grant muttered, sweat trickling down his collar. "The credit cards are linked to the corporate expense account. Charles must have frozen them to protect the company assets until the board meeting. That traitor." "Grant," Beatrice whimpered. "Everyone is looking. I feel like an animal in a zoo." "We are not animals," Grant shouted, causing a family nearby to recoil. "We are victims. This is a coordinated attack." He reached into his wallet and pulled out his personal Amex Centurion card, the black card. It was made of titanium and heavy with promise. He marched over to the rental car kiosk, pushing past a tired-looking man in a windbreaker. "I need a car," Grant demanded of the agent, a woman named Vanessa who was watching a video on her phone. The video. She looked up, recognizing him instantly. Her expression shifted from boredom to a steely, customer service politeness that was colder than ice. "Name?" she asked, though she clearly knew. "Grant Harrington, and I want the luxury SUV. Now." Vanessa typed slowly, agonizingly slowly. "I'm sorry, sir. Our system is flagging your license." "Flagging it for what? I have a perfect driving record." "It says here, high risk potential due to public disorder." It seems the rental agencies share a blacklist database with the airlines for security purposes. It's automated. I can't override it. "You have got to be kidding me." Grant slammed his hand on the counter. "I am a millionaire. I am not a security risk." "Sir, if you hit the counter again, I will call the police," Vanessa said, not blinking. "And seeing as the Port Authority just escorted you out of the secure area, I don't think you want to have a second chat with them." Grant backed away, his chest heaving. He looked at Beatrice, who was now hiding behind her sunglasses, weeping silently into her designer scarf. They were stranded. No flight, no car service, no rental. "Taxi!" Grant gritted out. "We have to take a yellow cab like peasants." They dragged their 6 Louis Vuitton suitcases out to the curb. The line for taxis was long, winding through the concrete pillars. Grant, out of habit, tried to walk to the front of the line, flashing a $20 bill at the dispatcher. "Back of the line, pal." The dispatcher, a burly man with a thick Queen's accent, jerked his thumb backward. "Do you know who—" Grant started. "Yeah, I know who you are," the dispatcher interrupted, stepping into Grant's personal space. "My wife sent me the video 10 minutes ago. She works cleaning those planes you think you own. You made a little girl cry? You get in the back of the line. And if I were you, I'd keep my mouth shut, 'cause the drivers here talk." Defeated, Grant and Beatrice trudged to the end of the line. It began to rain, a cold, grey New York drizzle that soaked through Grant's Italian wool suit and ruined Beatrice's blowout. As they stood there, shivering and humiliated, Grant's phone rang. It wasn't Charles, it wasn't the board, it was a number he didn't recognize. "Who is this?" Grant barked. "Mr. Harrington? This is Lydia from the New York Times." Grant's eyes lit up. Finally. The press. He could spin this. He could tell his side. "Lydia, thank God. Listen, you need to print the truth. I was targeted. The airline owner, Bennett, he has a vendetta. He humiliated me in front of my wife. I'm the victim of a woke corporate agenda gone mad." "Actually, Mr. Harrington," Lydia's voice was dry, professional, and detached. "I'm not calling about the flight. I'm calling about a tip we just received regarding your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Specifically, a shell company called Blue Horizon Logistics that seems to be funneling money from government contracts." The blood in Grant's veins turned to ice water. The noise of the airport faded into a dull roar. I don't know what you're talking about," Grant stammered. "We have documents, Mr. Harrington, leaked about 20 minutes ago. An anonymous source. They seem to show you've been overcharging the Department of Defense for shipping costs and pocketing the difference. We're running the story in the morning edition. Do you have a comment?" Grant looked at the phone as if it were a bomb. An anonymous source. Leaked 20 minutes ago. He remembered Arthur Bennett sitting in row 4. He remembered Bennett's calm voice. "I really hate losing money." And then, the parting shot. Grant Harrington is about to find out that the world is much smaller than he thinks. Bennett hadn't just called the police. He had called in a favor. He had opened the books. "No comment," Grant whispered, and hung up. The taxi line moved forward, but Grant didn't move. He stood in the rain, realizing that the seat on the plane wasn't the only thing he had lost today. He had pulled a thread, and his entire life was unraveling. While Grant and Beatrice were fighting over a soggy taxi in Queens, Marissa Jackson was descending through the clouds over Geneva. The view out of seat 2A was breathtaking, the Alps rising like jagged teeth of white and grey, piercing the blanket of blue. The flight had been a dream. Chloe, the flight attendant, had treated Marissa like royalty, bringing her extra blankets and a steady stream of hot chocolate. But despite the luxury, Marissa couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying the confrontation, the way Mr. Bennett had stood up, the way Grant had looked at her, like she was dirt. When the plane landed, Marissa waited for the other passengers to disembark. She didn't want to be in the way. "Ms. Jackson," she looked up. A man in a sharp black suit was standing at the aircraft door. He wasn't flight crew. He was ground security. "I'm here to escort you through customs," he said with a polite nod. "Mr. Bennett arranged it." He wants to ensure you have no further disturbances. Marissa grabbed her bag. Is Mr. Bennett coming? Mr. Bennett has business in New York, the man said. But he sent a message. He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, on heavy cream stationery, was a handwritten note. Marissa, the best revenge is massive success. Go build the future. I'll handle the past. AJB. Marissa smiled, tucking the note into her pocket. She walked off the plane, head held high, ready to meet her driver. Meanwhile, in New York, the sun was rising on a slaughter. The headquarters of Harrington Logistics was a glass and steel monolith in downtown Manhattan. Usually, the lobby was quiet and imposing. Today, it was a circus. News vans were double-parked along the street. Reporters were camped out by the revolving doors. Inside the boardroom on the 40th floor, the atmosphere was funereal. Preston Banks, the COO of Harrington Logistics, sat at the head of the table. Grant's seat. Preston was a shark in a pinstripe suit, a man who had waited 10 years for Grant to slip up. He hadn't expected Grant to swan dive into a volcano, but he wasn't going to waste the opportunity. Gentlemen, ladies, Preston addressed the board of directors. The stock is down 18% since the market opened. Our phones are ringing off the hook. 2 major shipping partners have already suspended contracts, pending an investigation into our corporate values. We need to distance ourselves, said Roger, a board member with nervous hands. We need a statement. We have a statement, Preston said, sliding a folder across the table. It announces Grant's immediate termination for cause. It announces Beatrice's removal from the charity board. And it announces my appointment as interim CEO to steer the ship through this turbulence. Will Grant sign it? Roger asked. He doesn't have a choice, Preston smiled, a cold, predatory baring of teeth, because if he doesn't, we release the internal audit of his expense accounts to the SEC, the one showing he used company funds to renovate his Hamptons estate. The door to the boardroom burst open. Grant Harrington stood there. He looked like a wreck. His suit was wrinkled from the rain, his eyes were bloodshot, and he hadn't shaved. He marched into the room, expecting to command the space as he always did. "What is this?" Grant demanded, his voice hoarse. "Why is my keycard deactivated? Why is security trying to stop me in the lobby?" "Sit down, Grant," Preston said, not bothering to stand up. "Don't tell me to sit down. I built this company." Grant slammed his fist on the table. "I had a bad day, a misunderstanding on a flight, and now you vultures are trying to push me out?" "It's not a misunderstanding, Grant," Preston said calmly. "It's a PR nuclear winter. You insulted a scholarship student. You threatened Arthur Bennett, a man who, I might remind you, has more connections in Washington than the president. And then your wife live-streamed it. "I can fix it," Grant pleaded, his bluster turning into desperation. "I'll do an apology tour. I'll go on Oprah. I'll donate to whatever charity the girl likes." "It's too late for charities," Preston said. He pressed a button on the conference phone. "Bring them in." "Bring who in?" Grant looked around wildly. The doors opened again. This time it wasn't security. It was 5 men and women in dark windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back, FBI. Leading them was an agent with a calm, tired face. Agent Miller. "Grant Harrington?" Miller asked. "Yes?" Grant's voice was a squeak. "I have a warrant for your arrest," Miller said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Arrest?" Grant backed into the credenza. "For what? Being rude on a plane isn't a federal crime." "No," Miller agreed, stepping forward. "But wire fraud is. Embezzlement of Department of Defense funds is. And thanks to a very detailed data dump we received last night from an anonymous source, regarding Blue Horizon Logistics. We have everything we need." Grant froze. The New York Times reporter hadn't been bluffing. Bennett hadn't been bluffing. "Beatrice!" Grant yelled, looking for his wife, but she wasn't there. She was likely at their penthouse, which was probably being raided at this very moment. "Turn around, Mr. Harrington," Miller ordered. Grant looked at the board members, his friends, his colleagues. They all looked away. Roger studied his pen. Preston watched with a satisfied smirk. "Preston," Grant begged. "Help me. Call the lawyers." "The company lawyers represent the company, Grant," Preston said smoothly. "Not you. You're on your own." The handcuffs clicked shut around Grant's wrists. The cold steel felt tighter than the ones in his imagination. As he was led out of the boardroom, past the employees he had terrorized for years, nobody clapped. The silence was far worse than the applause on the plane. It was the silence of people who were already forgetting him. But as Grant was shoved into the elevator, he had one last thought, a thought of pure, unadulterated spite. The girl. This was all her fault. If she had just moved seats, if she had just known her place. "I want my phone call," Grant muttered to Agent Miller as the elevator descended. "You'll get it at the station," Miller said. Grant planned to use that call, not to his lawyer, but to a man named Cyrus. Cyrus was a private investigator who operated in the grey areas of the law. Grant knew he was going down, but he wasn't going down alone. He was going to make sure that Marissa Jackson's scholarship in Switzerland turned into a nightmare. He would plant drugs in her dorm. He would hack her laptop. He would do whatever it took to destroy the little girl who had destroyed him. He didn't know that Arthur Bennett had anticipated this too. In fact, Arthur Bennett was currently sitting in his office in London, watching the news coverage of Grant's arrest on one screen and tracking a specific phone number on another. "He's going to call Cyrus," Arthur said to his head of security, a large man named Gregor. "We have Cyrus under surveillance, sir," Gregor said. "He's currently trying to leave the country. We tipped off Interpol an hour ago." Arthur took a sip of tea. "Good. Let Grant make the call. It will just add conspiracy to commit harassment to his charge sheet." Arthur leaned back. The easy part was destroying Grant Harrington. The hard part, the part that actually mattered, was making sure Marissa succeeded. "Gregor," Arthur said, "contact the dean of the Geneva program. Tell him I'm doubling the endowment, and tell him that Ms. Jackson is to have full access to the prototype labs. I want to see what she can do with those wing designs." "Yes, sir." Karma had hit Grant Harrington like a freight train. But for Marissa, the journey was just beginning, and the twists weren't over yet. Because while Grant was neutralized, Beatrice Harrington was still free. And a woman who has lost her status, her money, and her husband is a dangerous thing indeed. Beatrice Harrington sat in the back row of a budget airline flight headed for Geneva, her knees pressed against the seat in front. To the flight manifest, she was Betty Smith. To herself, she was a woman wronged. She had pawned her engagement ring, which she discovered was worth far less than Grant had claimed, to fund this desperate trip. With Grant in federal custody and their assets frozen, she had nothing left but a burning, obsessive hatred for the girl in seat 2A. In Beatrice's twisted narrative, the fraud and embezzlement weren't the problem. Marissa Jackson was. If the girl had just moved seats, none of this would have happened. Beatrice clutched a heavy tote bag containing stolen schematics from Grant's office, crudely altered with a marker to look like they predated Marissa's work. Her plan was simple: sneak into the scholarship showcase, plant the evidence, and scream to the world that Marissa was a thief. Meanwhile, in the pristine laboratories of the Bennett Institute, Marissa was exhausted, but determined. She stood over a wind tunnel model, frowning at the data. "The airflow is still separating," her lab partner Raj noted wearily. "We need to adjust the curvature." "No," Marissa murmured, zooming in on the tablet. "It's the texture. We need biomimicry, owl feathers." Raj looked at the clock. "Marissa, we don't have time to 3D print a new prototype before the showcase on Friday." "I'll do it by hand," Marissa said, picking up a microfile tool. "I'll stay all night if I have to." Fueled by espresso and the memory of Arthur Bennett's command to stand twice as tall, Marissa worked through the darkness. She wasn't just working for a grade, she was carving her place in the world. By Thursday evening, the prototype was finished, a sleek, matte black wing section that whispered rather than roared when the air hit it. Marissa locked the lab door and stepped out into the cool Swiss night, unaware that eyes were watching her from the shadows of an ancient oak tree. Beatrice waited until Marissa disappeared. She had slipped past campus security hours ago and was running on adrenaline and spite. "Enjoy your moment," she whispered. "Tomorrow, everyone will know you're a fraud." She scurried across the courtyard to the lab entrance and punched in a code she thought she had memorized from a distance. Error. She tried again. Error. Panic set in. Beatrice grabbed a heavy landscaping stone and heaved it at the glass door. Thud. The reinforced polycarbonate didn't even crack, but the impact triggered a silent alarm. Beatrice raised the rock again, feral with desperation. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Beatrice froze. The voice came from the darkness behind her. She spun around to find a man in a grey suit holding an umbrella. It was Gregor, Arthur Bennett's head of security. "Who are you?" Beatrice hissed. "Go away, I'm a professor." Gregor stepped into the light, looking like a tank in a suit. "Mrs. Harrington, Mr. Bennett anticipated you might struggle with the concept of consequences." Beatrice dropped the rock, her hands shaking. "How did you find me?" "We flagged your passport when you pawned the ring," Gregor said calmly. "We watched you buy the binoculars. We watched you hide in the maintenance closet. Honestly, it was embarrassing to watch." "I want to see her," Beatrice screamed, lunging at the door. "She ruined my life. She stole everything." Gregor caught her wrist effortlessly. "She didn't steal anything, Beatrice. You threw it away." He reached into her open tote bag and pulled out the altered documents. "And using a Sharpie to change dates on industrial schematics? That isn't just a crime. It's pathetic." He released her, and Beatrice turned to run, only to find her path blocked by 3 Swiss police officers. "Mrs. Harrington," the lead officer said, "you are under arrest for attempted industrial espionage and trespassing. In Switzerland, we take banking and engineering very seriously." Beatrice fell to her knees, sobbing as the cold reality washed over her. There were no senators to call her, no influence to wield. As the officers dragged her away, Gregor pulled out his phone and sent a single text to Arthur Bennett. "Package secured. The student is safe. The auditorium of the Bennett Institute was packed with titans from Boeing, Airbus, and Lockheed Martin." Marissa stood on stage, her old blazer pressed sharp. The fear of being an imposter flared one last time, but vanished when she saw Arthur Bennett in the front row, offering a subtle nod. Marissa presented the Silent Wing initiative. When she revealed the wind tunnel data, a 40% noise reduction and 15% fuel efficiency, The room went dead silent. An executive from Airbus raised a hand. "Ms. Jackson, is this design patented?" Arthur stood up, his voice projecting clearly. "Filed this morning, in Ms. Jackson's name. Bennett Aviation claims no ownership. She owns the IP entirely. Bidding for licensing starts now." The room erupted. Marissa watched in shock as the biggest names in aviation shouted offers, starting a bidding war right on the floor. In that moment, she transformed from a scholarship student to a prodigy with a multi-million-dollar future. 5 years later, Regal Atlantic Flight 882 cruised toward Geneva. In seat 2A, a woman in a tailored cream suit typed on her laptop. "Excuse me, Miss Jackson?" A young flight attendant hovered nearby, looking nervous. "I read your Forbes interview. It inspired me to go back to school for avionics." Marissa smiled warmly. "That's wonderful. What's your name?" "Sarah." "Well, Sarah," Marissa said, "work hard. And if anyone ever tries to tell you that you don't belong in the room, stand twice as tall," Sarah finished, beaming. Exactly. While Marissa soared, her tormentors had crashed. Grant Harrington was currently in year 4 of a federal sentence, folding laundry in a Pennsylvania prison, consumed by a bitterness that would never dissolve. Beatrice, deported and destitute, sat in a cramped apartment in Ohio working as a telemarketer, her diamonds long gone. And Arthur Bennett? He enjoyed his retirement fishing in Scotland, with Marissa's Christmas card always pinned to his fridge. As the wheels touched down in Geneva, smooth and silent, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Welcome back, Miss Jackson." Marissa looked out at the runway. The turbulence was finally behind her. The sky was hers. This story isn't just about a plane seat. It's about the cost of arrogance and the power of dignity. Grant and Beatrice Harrington thought their wealth gave them the right to displace others, but they learned the hard way that true power isn't about how much money you have. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Marissa didn't just keep her seat, she soared above the hate, proving that excellence is the best revenge. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder to stand tall, and subscribe for more dramatic stories of underdogs taking back what's theirs. What would you have done if you were in Marissa's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.